Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Speak Plainly podcast, where we speak plainly about things that matter. I'm your host, Owl Medicine, and in today's podcast, we're going to be talking about one of my personal favorite things ever: procrastination. So, we're going to talk a lot about procrastination today. Hopefully it's not going to be too long of an episode, but we're going to talk about procrastination in general. We're going to talk about kind of who does it and why, and that's basically everybody. And it turns out the why is really important because there's actually 3 kinds of procrastination. And we unfortunately only use one word for that, which is unfortunate because we're trying to describe 3 different things with 3 different solutions using one word. And I'm sure you can figure out for yourself how well that works. Are you a procrastinator? Do you procrastinate? Probably. So, that's what we're going to cover today. I hope you stick with me all the way to the end. And if you do, I'm going to have a little surprise for you. So, procrastination. What is it? Well, procrastination is basically waiting till the last minute to complete a task, right? I feel like we all kind of know that. It's waiting until the very last minute possible to complete a task. And this is why I say it's one of my favorite things ever, because when I think of procrastination, I think of me in high school and how I worked a bunch of jobs. I was super busy all the time. I've never been able to sit still. I never wanted to go home, so I would do anything to not be home. So I was always at work or at school, always doing something. And that something was never my homework or studying or anything that had to do with school outside of being there. So I wouldn't go to jail, and neither would my mom. But what I did do in high school was I would sit and I literally calculated like what score I would have to get on what tests in order to pass the class so I could pass and graduate. And I remember calculating, looking at like my algebra assignments and going, okay, there's 28 problems in this homework. And it's due today. So if I can get like 5 of them done in history class and 4 of them done at lunch and then 8 of them done before choir starts, and then so I would do all of this work to calculate exactly how long I could wait before I had to do whatever it was I had to do. That's how much I love procrastination. I love procrastination so very much. And luckily for me, now I feel like I have excuses. And I like having excuses for the things I do and the way that I naturally am, because then I can stop beating myself up for it. So I'm going to give you some of my excuses. Here's one you can try on. I'm a projector in human design. I don't know if you know human design stuff, but in human design, there's a whole bunch of stuff to it. But for projectors, one of the things that we're supposed to keep in mind is waiting for the invitation. We tend to be like smart, inquisitive people who study lots and lots of different things to some level of competency. And we're supposed to wait for the invitation of other people for us to tell them whatever bit of sage advice that we may have. I can guarantee that 60 to 80 or 90% of the people that have podcasts and YouTube shows, especially ones that are like edutainment like this is, most of them are probably projectors. And one of the themes that we have in our life, like I said, is waiting for the invitation. And that's annoying because we're like, hey, I've got the answer to your problem. But if you don't want to hear it and you haven't asked me for the answer, then I'll just throw essentially pearls before swine or whatever is like from my perspective. From your perspective, it's unsolicited advice and you're not going to get any benefit from it. And then I'm going to leave bitter. And so like that gets into the human design a little bit of my theme being bitterness as a projector, but that's how that bitterness comes about. So we're not supposed to be just throwing all of our information out at people. We're supposed to wait for the invitation. And here's where it touches procrastination. What are we supposed to be doing while we are waiting for the invitation? We're supposed to be preparing. Preparing is our job. We are supposed to be prepared. We're supposed to be studying. We're supposed to be getting into the things that we find interesting and getting them into our minds in a way that we can share it with other people, because that is our purpose. Which is why people like me, projectors, are almost always, if not always, procrastinators, because our job is to be prepared. Our job is not to finish a task, not until someone has asked for it. But if we sit down and write and get our ideas out of our own head, then we can know what ideas are in our own head. We can get down to a way that is easily communicable. And when someone does come ask us, and there is a need, which is important here with procrastination, there is a genuine need to accomplish the thing, to finish the thing, then I'm supposed to finish something. That's when I finish what I have been just working on and never finishing, and we call that procrastination. And it may or may not be, but as a projector, my job, like I said, is to be prepared and wait for that invitation. And when that invitation comes, I have this thing that I've started on. How many unfinished projects do you have? And we're like, well, I'm procrastinating on finishing. And that is still a type of procrastination. I know at the beginning we said that it's waiting until the last minute to do a task, and that could be waiting to the last minute to start a task usually, or waiting until the last minute to complete a task. We can do some of the basic easy legwork sometimes, but that all depends on what type of procrastination you are doing. For me, one of my excuses as a projector is that I'm supposed to have my fingers in 1,000 different things, and it's just simply inefficient for me to try to finish every single thing that I start, because I'm interested, I'm inquisitive, I'm curious. So I'm going to dive deep, as far deep as I want to go into a subject. And then when it's no longer fun, when it's no longer beneficial, when I'm not getting anything out of it, I stop. And that's all I need to do. I don't need to do anything besides that. So that is an excuse I have for procrastinating, is I don't finish things because my job is to be prepared. And when somebody asks me a question, then I already have the groundwork laid for me in my journals, usually, for me to then be able to pick up where I left off in my preparation, and then I have the information available to get something to them completed and done and ready in a pretty short order amount of time. But until that moment, it is procrastination, right? Because I'm procrastinating finishing. So now let's talk about the 3 types of procrastination. There are 3 basic categories, and they have different solutions. The first kind of procrastination is idyllic procrastination, or idealistic or fantasy procrastination. This is the kind of procrastination that happens when you dream big. This is the perfection procrastination. This is, I can't get started because I need to make this perfect, and I can't start until I have a perfect plan to make it perfect, and you'll never be perfect, so you never start. That's idealistic fantasy procrastination. The next kind is consequence. And this is the avoidance kind of procrastination. And this usually has to do with our emotional repercussions, or the repercussions of whatever, like the repercussions as in the consequences of whatever it is that we have to do. And the last is called operational procrastination. And I think more and more people have operational procrastination because we live in a civilization that is essentially a nanny culture. that like our civilization, our whole culture is designed in a way where you don't have to do any kind of critical thinking. They give you A, B, C, D all the way to Z, and you just go like one foot in front of the other. So I think most people suffer with 1 and 3 more than 2, but 2 is still very common. 3, this operational, the reason it's hard is because we're doing things that are unclear. Operational procrastination is about difficulty with unclear instructions. All right, so there's the 3 different types: idealistic, consequence, and operational. So how do you know which one you're doing? Because we all do all of them, right? Like, you're not going to be just an idealistic procrastinator or just an operational. We all do all of them because procrastination is actually, at its foundation, a very, very effective problem-solving technique. That's why it's pervasive through the entire species. If it was pathological, we would be dead. Does that make sense? If procrastination was pathological, if procrastination didn't work for our species, we wouldn't be alive because we all do it. Another way to say it is, if procrastination didn't work, we all wouldn't be doing it. What happens with all procrastination is, last week we talked about that cost-benefit analysis. Well, that doesn't exist in just that podcast episode. It's not just about discipline, that moves into procrastination as well. This cost-benefit analysis is always happening behind the scenes, and it's always concerned with caloric efficiency. And that's why things like operational procrastination especially are difficult. But this operational efficiency is why we do procrastination. Because think about it. So if you get an assignment in school, right, and you have 3 months to do this assignment, when do you start working on it? 2 weeks before it starts, a week before it starts. It really depends on how smart you are. The smarter you are, the longer you'll wait. And I know that seems backwards, because it seems like the smart people should just be able to get it all done and move on, and smart people don't suffer from procrastination. Well, I'm here to tell you that's bullshit. We do know that actually people who are smarter have a much harder time with procrastination, because it is actually a very wise thing to do. Like I said, that's why it's ubiquitous through the entire human species. It is a calorically efficient problem-solving mechanism. This cost-benefit analysis is going, why would I put 3 months of work into what I could do in 3 nights? Doesn't make sense, does it? Yeah, you should do it. You got your teachers, you got whatever telling you to do this. You need to pass, you need to graduate, you got these goals and blah, blah, blah. But your body doesn't give a damn about those things. Your procrastination is a function of the body. It is a subconscious thing that only becomes conscious when we call on it and dig into it. And that subconscious cost-benefit analysis is going, nah, brah, nah. So this is the first thing to understand about procrastination. Outside of there are 3 main categories, the number one thing to understand about procrastination is that it's actually a very efficient problem-solving mechanism. And I know that sounds weird, but think about it, because procrastination is not failing, is it? That's failing. Procrastination is not failing. So why is it a problem? Well, it's a problem because we wait till the last minute and then we get all stressed out. But if you get it done, what's the big deal? Just some questions for us to ask ourselves. So, the first thing to understand about procrastination is it is a calorically efficient, problem-solving, cost-benefit analysis function of the body. So let's dive in now to the 3 types. We'll go in a little bit deeper this time. We're going to look at idealistic procrastination, and I'm going to give you the solve for it. And you've heard me say this earlier in the podcast, but not on a specifically procrastination-based episode. I think we talked about this in the perfection episode. So this idealistic procrastination is really highly associated with creative people, believe it or not. Creative people procrastinate sometimes the most. If you're smart and creative, you probably are damn near paralyzed with your procrastination, because you must be efficient and you must be novel. Which means part of the reason creative people have this idealistic procrastination is because while everybody else is working hard and they're doing their due diligence to get their A, and as soon as they get the assignment and they do that A, and I say everybody else, we all know there was only like 2 people in the whole classroom that actually did this. But if that's the goal that we're going for, we'll call that them. So they sit around and they do what they're supposed to as soon as they're supposed to do it. That way they can relax and they can chill. They got their work done. They're good to go. They got no pressure on them. That must be nice, right? Well, we're creative and we're smart, which means that what we have to do must not just give us an A, but it also must be more impressive than what anybody else has done. So it's got to be novel. It's got to be new. And what novelty is, what creativity is putting 2 things that didn't seemingly go together before together. So we just in the back of our heads are like mulling over with our little ADHD brains quite often. We're mulling over all of the different ways that we could change it, all the cool things that we could talk about. And a lot of times maybe we don't actually do the creative part. Maybe we wait so long that we wind up having to just get something out as fast as we can. And we got our B or our C, we barely pass, and that's good enough. But part of why we're procrastinating is because we have this idealistic version of what we want to do. Whether that's you want to get the perfect score and check every box just because you want to check every box, or if you're the more creative person and you want to check every box and make something more novel, what's happening is there is a fantasy going on in our heads about what our goal is. And at first, it may not be a fantasy, right? Usually it's not, in fact. At first, when we get that assignment that we've got 3 months to finish, we have 3 months to finish it. So it's not a fantasy. It's not a fantasy to think that I can come up with a novel way to express something. And I can do that really, really well, and I can get a great grade on it. That's easy to do in 3 months. 2 months down the road, when you've only got a few weeks left and you've got all these other classes and assignments, that might be a fantasy. So over time, what wasn't a fantasy and what was a genuinely attainable goal, possibly, is no longer attainable. But we won't give up on it, because we haven't recognized fully that it is no longer attainable. It was at one point genuinely. We know that we have the creativity and the power and the intelligence to achieve our goal in this and to do something wonderful with it. But when it's just a month away, now suddenly that's way harder to do, and the pressure builds and the pressure builds and the pressure builds. A week, 3 weeks out, the pressure builds. 2 weeks out, the pressure builds. 10 days out, 7 days out, 5 days out. The pressure is just, it's orders of magnitude what it was even just a week out. We forget that as time marches on, what was attainable is not. And that's an unfortunate thing of aging in life and all of that, but that's the reality. And I'm not going to get off on that soapbox right now. But what this brings me to is the solution for idealistic procrastination. Again, there's 3 types. This is the idyllic procrastination, and we have to have separate solutions for each of them. If you go to a doctor and you say, "Hey doctor, I'm sick. I need you to make me better." The doctor goes, "Okay, here's some meds." And the next guy comes in and says, "Hey doc, I'm sick. Make me better." And he goes, "Sure, here's some meds." If there is no differentiation, if I'm giving the same meds, like if a doctor or whatever is giving the same, I'm not a doctor. If a doctor is giving the same meds to a guy with erectile dysfunction and a guy with high blood pressure and a guy with a stroke and a guy with eczema, and how good of a doctor do you think he's going to be? This is why we have different solutions. So the first step is figuring out which type of procrastination that you're in. And the way to understand this idyllic procrastination is it's all about when I'm not ready. If you're having thoughts about when I'm ready and thoughts of where there's a fantasy happening of you want to have the perfect score and it's all wonderful, chances are this is idyllic procrastination. And the solution to that idyllic procrastination is grief. You've got to grieve. This also might sound weird, but it might not. Maybe that just kind of hit you in the chest because you had 3 months to make the perfect assignment, to turn in a perfect essay, to create your doctoral thesis, your capstone presentation, your whatever. If you wait and wait and wait, eventually you come to a place where you can't do that. If your goal was to have a 4.0 and it's halfway through the semester and you're looking at a 2.0, trying to have a 4.0, wanting a 4.0 is only going to cause you to procrastinate because it's basically impossible. And so what you have to do is you have to grieve the loss of that goal. You have to grieve the loss of whatever it was that you were intending on doing. And once you do that, you accept what is. Because the reality is there is only a week left before the assignment's due. Right? You can't create a masterpiece in a week. Maybe you can. But if you can, then you probably waited until 3 days. There are real-world limitations to what we can do, and one of those is time. There are many others, but if you have a fantasy about what it is that you want and how you want it to be done at the end, if what you want done at the end is anything resembling perfection, that is a fantasy. If you want it to be wonderful, that's a fantasy. If you want it to turn out a certain way so a certain person or group of people will love you or like you or accept you, that is a goddamned fantasy. And you have to grieve that. You have to grieve the fact that it's not real. You have to grieve the fact that what you desired is not available. In the same way that children have to grieve Santa Claus isn't real at a certain age. At a certain point in time with our procrastination, we have to grieve the fact that we missed out on 2 months of time to make this as good as it could have been. Because that's the whole thing of idyllic procrastination. It's about perfectionism. And perfectionism is just fear in high heels. So that's type number 1, idyllic procrastination. This is the fantasy. It's the fantasy of what we want. It's the dreaming too big. It's the I'm not ready. The I'll start when I'm ready. This is why the very first episode of this podcast was called Done is Better Than Perfect. Because I kept doing the idealistic procrastination. I wanted to do the podcast. It had been encouraged in me by many friends for a long time, and I wanted it to be good. And I finally was just like, I need it to be done. And if it's good, if it's bad, whatever, it just needs to be done. And I had to grieve the fact that it wasn't perfect. I had to get over that and had to really sit with, it's not going to be the most phenomenal podcast episode ever, but that's okay. done is better than perfect. So the solution for idealistic procrastination is grieving. You have to grieve. All right, now we're going to move on to procrastination style number 2. This is consequence procrastination or avoidance procrastination. And this one, and there's a little bit of overlap between them. A lot of times we have a little bit of a blend, but usually it's a little bit clear which one or ones are the most prominent, and that's how we deal with it. And in this one, if you want to know if you're doing consequence procrastination, what you're looking at is you're looking at the repercussions. You're looking at especially the emotional repercussions of you want to ask for a raise, but you're afraid of what your boss is going to say. You're not even just afraid of the yes or the no. You're afraid of the rejection. You're afraid of the way he's going to look at you. She's going to talk to you. You're afraid of how it's going to be perceived. There's some kind of emotional repercussion that you are not looking forward to, and you avoid it because you're trying to avoid feeling a specific emotion, often rejection or sadness. That is the foundation of consequence procrastination. There is something that you are trying to do that you will have to pay a consequence for, and there's no way around it. Like, that's in life, there aren't good decisions and bad decisions. There are just decisions and there are consequences. And the consequence of shooting your shot could be an emotional repercussion that you don't want. You want to ask, is your partner cheating? But you're afraid of what they're going to say. And this one's hard because a lot of times we don't know what we're feeling, especially in this modern age where everybody is online. Young people especially don't, like, we have a hard time emotionally picking up what other people are putting down. But luckily, procrastinators are pretty smart people. We're a pretty smart group of folks. So even if we have terrible emotional empathy, we have really good cognitive empathy. And basically what that means is, like, emotional empathy when you're in the presence of somebody else who can tell what they're feeling. And cognitive empathy is where when you are in the presence of someone else, you can rationally and logically understand how they're feeling by running a kind of algorithm of sorts. And this is the solution to consequence procrastination. You have to go, what emotions are being avoided? What emotion am I trying to avoid by procrastinating, by putting off doing this thing that I know that I need to do? And if you don't know the answer to that, and I expect that many people won't, I've got a series of other questions that you can ask yourself. How would someone else feel if they were in the situation that you are in? Ask yourself that. This is the process of cognitive empathy. If I can't tell what you're feeling just because you're sitting next to me, I can at least figure it out. And this is how we figure out cognitive empathy. We go, well, how would someone else feel in that situation? And then once you figure out how they might feel, you now know the answer of what emotions are being avoided, right? And then the next step is, what would you say to that friend? What would you say to the friend who was trying to avoid feeling this way? Because we're typically more supportive of our friends than we are of ourselves. We tend to be tough on ourselves and expect a lot, and when we don't measure up, we berate ourselves. Lots of folks. Maybe you don't. Good for you. If you don't, then you're probably not listening to this podcast episode. The podcast period. But you've got to remember that, like, in the modern world, we don't have an angel and a demon whispering good things and evil things into our ears. We have a judge and a coach. We have that as our angel and demon. We have someone who is going to judge us, and that's usually our own inner voice being our inner critic, telling us everything that we did wrong. You piece of shit. I can't believe you did this again. Why are you always like this? That's the judge. What you need to develop for yourself, what I have developed for myself, thanks to some wonderful friends, has been the coach. Because that's what you say to a friend. When a friend has to talk to their husband or their wife or their partner because they're concerned that they're being cheated on, and they don't want to just sit around and wait because that's painful. So they want to ask, but they're afraid to ask because they don't know what to say, and they're afraid of what the answer will be. You got to sit with it. There's a very real emotional weight that is being carried through this consequence procrastination. We're worried emotionally about the emotional consequences, because most of us can take real world consequences. But rejection, on a organism level, on a species level, rejection by other humans, if it happens by all humans, or at least by those who are supposed to take care of us, that's death. And those of us with rejection sensitivity and ADHD kids are known to have a high correlation with rejection sensitivity. Chronic stress adapted people, rejection sensitivity. That might be what you're avoiding. So, if you seem to be avoiding a consequence, and that is why you are procrastinating, ask yourself what emotion is being avoided. And if you can't tell what emotion is being avoided, ask yourself, what would someone else feel in your situation? And then what you would say to them. And that might take a while, right? Because what do you say to somebody who is suspicious of their partner cheating on them and they thought that they were in a committed, monogamous, long-term relationship? It won't be flippant, I'll tell you that. Not if you're a good friend. So what would you say to them? That's how you figure out consequence procrastination. Now we're going to talk about operational procrastination. This is the one where I feel like our civilization in general has really fostered this kind of procrastination with our education system, especially where we're told what to do, one thing after another, after another, after another. Gamers are another big one here, where the game has kind of chunked everything for you, and all you have to worry about is the next step. And so you just do the next step, which is important here, because before we get too deep into operational, a very superficial thing to remind yourself of about operational is, if procrastination is waiting until the last possible minute to do a task, then it's important to remember there is no first step. There is no first step. There is only the next step. First step thinking, I gotta come up with a plan, and then I can take and then I can do the first step. But there is no first step. There's just a next step. And that's not a philosophy. This is just a basic statement of reality. You've already done things. The first step for anything could be traced back to, language. Depending on how far back you want to go, when you look at, you can first step anything at any point. The world is interdependent that way. So all that you ever have is the next step. The first step of writing a paper is probably maybe getting a pen, or maybe it's learning to read, or then learning to write, learning to spell. Is that the first step? I don't know. It's totally abstract in that way. That's why the first step is useless. So if you're a procrastinator, get that out of your head right now and forever, because the most important step is always the next step, because it's the only one. It's the only one that you can take. So let's talk operational procrastination. This is the third kind, and this is because the brain has difficulty with unclear instructions, right? There is a operation, there is some kind of task that we need to do, and it's unclear. Like, and our language is ripe with this shit. We have like, go clean your room or go find a job. Well, what's the first step to that? What is the first step to cleaning your room? What is the first step to finding a job? Well, that depends on where you're at, right? So it's the next step. With where you're at, what is a next thing that you can do? Not the next thing, but what is a next thing that you can do to take one step toward that? And the reason that we have trouble with operational procrastination is because it is calorically inefficient to like fuck with abstract concepts. It is fun, and it is like, that is my favorite mental masturbation. I love abstract concepts and trying to make them like have rubber meet the road somewhere. It's one of my favorite pastimes, and it now actually does me some good occasionally, but most of it's just mental masturbation. But most of us have had everything told to us. You do this and then this, and because we're so interconnected that we're part of a business that has many moving parts. And so even our jobs, not even just our school, but our jobs as well, they tell you, here's the operation I need you to do. And you don't need to worry about anybody else's. You don't need to worry about the bigger picture. You're just told, do this and then this, right? But when you're told to do something like clean a room or find a job, that's actually a whole series of operations. So like if you tell a 2-year-old, clean your room, your 2-year-old's going to go into the room and just like stand there and not have any idea what to do, and then probably just pick something up and start playing with it because they're like, I don't know. Because clean up your room is not a task. That is a whole series of things. If you tell your 4-year-old or your 5-year-old go clean your room, the 5-year-old has the brain power to understand that that means things like, I got to pick up the stuff off of my floor and put it away. I need to make my bed. I need to wipe things down or whatever. But they understand that clean your room is it's an abstract concept that describes a whole series of operational tasks. And it's difficult to do things with unclear instructions. So if you were trying to do something that is new to you, that you haven't done before, it feels unclear because you haven't done it before. Or if you've done it before but only once or a long time ago, that's really hard. And we procrastinate those a lot because we have this sense of, I should be able to just do it because I've done it before, but I just can't seem to get started. And this is because the task itself is unclear. The way to tell if you're dealing with operational procrastination is if you can think about after the task, you go, oh, well, that wasn't bad. That's operational procrastination. Because the task itself isn't that difficult. It's the abstract nature of it that creates the friction because we don't know exactly what to do. So if you're like, yeah, oh, that wasn't that bad, you're pretty well set, you know? So with finding a job, that could be building a resume. It could be editing your resume and going to interviews. But before the interview, you got to get a nice suit, you got to get a haircut, you got to shave. These are all individual operations that go into this abstract concept of find a job, which is totally misleading because find a job? Are you just going to walk down the sidewalk and pick up a job like a dirty penny off the corner? No, you're not. But that's the term that we use. Go find a job. And it is abstract enough, you just can't get started. So The way to get through operational procrastination is to operationalize the whole thing. This is a great way to go about it. You just create lists of things that you have to do related to the abstract concept. So in the find job, it would be write resume, send resumes. It would be get a haircut. It would be shave. It would be like all of these little things that go into it. Because if you don't have a resume, you have to write one. And if you do, you have to edit it. And if you're trying to pull up multiple resumes into multiple places and you're trying to cater each one, you've got to edit each one for every single one of those. All of those are individual operational tasks. And if you can't get started, there's a chance that this might be why. And that's how you solve it, as you create lists of actual steps in it. So I was talking with a friend of mine at the coffee shop yesterday who was telling me about her daughter. She's got a couple of grown kids and some grandkids, and she's got an older daughter who's very, very kind of hard and does that firstborn thing really well. And the whole family's spicy brained, as she calls them, which I love because she's in her 70s, and I love that she uses spicy brain. But because her daughters taught her this term. Well, the oldest daughter reminded the mom, my friend, to think about the middle daughter as a kind of special needs person, because she is on the autistic spectrum and didn't find that out until way later in life. And when my friend was feeling hurt because she actually came to town on Mother's Day and didn't do anything besides the normal, send some flowers. But they were in town 10 minutes away and didn't even show up for Mother's Day, and has been spending more and more time with her husband's family and these things that are hurtful. She was like, this hurts, and I have to say something. I've got to say something. So she spoke to her older daughter, and the older daughter said, okay, yeah, but you have to speak to her very, very directly and very plainly, because she's on the autistic spectrum, and the oldest daughter's wife is also on the autistic spectrum, and she has to deal with her wife in a similar way. So she sat down and she told her, look, you need to be very direct. You can't beat around the bush. Don't get emotional. Don't cry. All of that just confuses the message. Be very plain. And so she was very plain, and she talked to her, and she said, hey, and she explained the whole situation and said, do you see how this could hurt me? And she sat there for a good long minute. I said, no, I really don't. I don't see how that could hurt you. And my friend was taken aback. She was like, for real? For realsy reals? How do you not see that? How do you not see how painful this is? You're my daughter. You were 5-10 minutes away, and you didn't come see me or even call me on Mother's Day so you could go be with your husband's mom, who's hours away. They went further away. It was a whole thing. But she didn't get it. And this is not just an autism thing, but this is operational tasking. And so what she did, my friend, she talked to her daughter and said, this hurts me. Do you understand? She said no. Well, over the course of the next 2 days, she called her back. The daughter called her back and goes, okay, I do now. I see how that would actually be painful. What do you want from me? What is it that you want? And she was able to give her a very exact, actual task. Not, I want you to call me more. Not, I want to feel closer to you. Not, I wish that you'd be around more often. Not, I wish that you loved me as much as you love your husband's family. None of that crap, because that's not an operational task. Those are abstract concepts that we hope translate into operational tasks, but they are not operational tasks. She said, when you come to Squim and you go to Costco and you have an hour or so, I'd love for you to come by. Cool, I can do that. Fantastic. Right? Like, that's awesome. And the day after that, they were out driving past the lake, and the daughter remembered going on the lake and renting a cabin when they were kids every year and all the fun that they had, and started thinking about her mom more and called her more over the next couple of days just from that. Just from having one conversation where she gave her an operational task. That was it. It was just a simple operation. When you come to this location and you have this amount of time, will you come by? That's what I would like. I would like for you to come by when these things happen. There is no room for like emotional error. There's like really no room for error there. It's either yes, I can or no, I can't. And it worked. It worked beautifully because she gave her that task. That is what we're talking about when we talk about operational procrastination. We're talking about the difficulty that we have with unclear instructions that after we do the thing, we're like, oh, that wasn't bad at all. It's the whole reason it's hard is because abstract tasks are difficult. If you tell a 2-year-old to put a toy away, they'll do that. And if you tell them to pick up the stuff off of the floor and put it where it belongs, they'll do that too, so long as they know where each of those individual pieces belong. If you tell that child to make their bed, they can do that as well. But if you say clean the room, they don't have that abstract part of their brain developed. But you tell the 4-year-old clean the room and they totally get that it's an entire series of tasks. Same thing with going and finding a job. It's an entire series of tasks. So if operational procrastination is what you're dealing with whatever thing that you're procrastinating on right now, afterward, you're probably going to go, oh, that wasn't that bad. And the way that you solve it is you make a list of steps. And if it's really complicated, like writing a book, chunk it into parts, and then break those parts into tasks. This is why my book has 4 sections and umpteen chapters within the sections, because I couldn't there were too many things for me to keep in mind and understand with just series of chapters. I had to chunk it into part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, and give a theme to each of those parts, and then break those themes down into their smaller pieces. That is an operationalized system. So, try operationalizing whatever it is that you have to do. And here's a really awesome part. Operationalization of complicated abstract tasks prevents despair. Operationalization prevents despair from failure. And the reason is because if your only step to finding a job is to get a job, all you have to do is apply to one place and get rejected once, and you have failed. You are a failure. And that can launch despair pretty easily because you only have one check mark. You only have one thing on your list that can denote whether or not you actually achieved your goal. So, it's really important to operationalize these things and create lists upon lists upon lists if that's necessary. Because every single step on the way to finding a job, getting your suit cleaned and editing your resume and shaving your face and getting a haircut, all of those are tasks that you accomplished. So when you operationalize them and you put a check mark next to all of those things, and then you go and you actually do the interview, if you can check the interview off too. And then the only box that's not checked is get the job. So now you have a list of 50 freaking things that you did and only one that you didn't. And 49 out of 50 ain't bad. So the longer, in a way, even though it seems a bit obtuse, the longer your checklist is, the more operations you have in your operationalization procedure, the less despair you're going to have. We got to break things up into their smallest pieces. That is what operationalization is. that's what I gotta say about procrastination. Procrastination is not failing. Procrastination is waiting to the last possible minute to complete a task, which we covered is actually a very, very efficient system, because why would you put 3 months of effort into something that would only take 2 days? It doesn't make biological sense. It doesn't, period. There are 3 types of procrastination: idealistic, consequential, and operational. And now you know how to identify which one you're dealing with. Are you dealing with a fantasy scenario of you want it to be perfect? You're idealistic. Are you avoiding the repercussions of what might happen once you shoot your shot, and that's why you're procrastinating on shooting your shot? That's avoidance. That's consequence. And if you are trying to do something that is abstract, that doesn't have an actual list of things in front of you that you need to do, that's operational. If you think you're going to, at the end of it, be like, oh, that wasn't that bad at all, that's operational. And what you got to do is make a list of the steps that you need to do. And if it's a big enough task, chunk it and then break it into a list. These are the 3 different types of procrastination. You are not a failure for procrastinating. You are human for procrastinating. It is a very efficient problem-solving apparatus that is built into each and every one of us. It prevents us from wasting a ton of time and energy on things that we don't need to be wasting it on. The last little thing I'll say about procrastination, surprise! This is your surprise at the end, is we tend to procrastinate on things that we need to do, not things that we want to do, right? So if we need to do something, that means we're going to have to do it. And that means it has to be functional because we need it. Whatever we do with it, we have to get it done, and it has to be semi-functional because it's a genuine need. So why would we start that early? Because if we're going to do it and we're going to do it well enough to pass, why would we do it early? That doesn't make sense. Of course, we're not going to do anything that you don't need to do. That's also biologically inefficient. We're not going to do anything that you don't need to do. So if there is something that you want to do, you got to figure out, is it something that you actually want to do, or is it something that you just want to do? Same thing with the discipline in the last episode. Do you want to do it, or do you want to do it? Those are 2 very different things. And if you just want to do it, try to find a narrative that can make you actually want it. Because I don't want to find a job, but I do want to look good, so I do want to get a haircut, and that's kind of like getting a job. That's part of it, right? That's the last thing I'll say about it is procrastination we do on things that we need to do because we know that we will do them to a level that they need to be done because it's a need. So we don't have to worry about it at all. The brain doesn't worry about it. We're totally unconcerned because we know that it is a genuine need. We have to do this thing, so we know that we will. If it causes us stress, so what? If we have to wait till the last minute, yeah, of course we will. Of course we will. It's a need. So there's procrastination in a nutshell. You know what it is. You know what it's not. You know the 3 types, you know how to identify which of the 3 types that you're dealing with, and each of us deal with all 3. Just depends on what the situation is. And now you have solutions to figuring out what type of procrastination that you're doing and how to get yourself out of it. And a lot of us deal with this idealistic a lot, and I know it's bizarre, but grief is how we deal with idealistic procrastination. Grieving is the solution for perfectionism. You got to grieve the fantasy of what you had, what you wanted. Thank you very much for hanging out with me today. I hope that you enjoyed this podcast. I hope you got something out of it, and I hope that you were entertained. If you like this podcast, consider contributing on Patreon. I'd love to hear from you guys. Email me at I'd love to hear from you guys. Email me at speakplainly@gmail.com. No, that's not right either. Email me at speakplainlypodcast@gmail.com, and I would love to hear from you. I will get back to you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I hope you have a marvelous week. And remember, stay curious and stay uncomfortable.